Welcome, you're watching Vox News, your daily evening news with Rita Kamkumo. Our headlines today: Lesotho Prime Minister Tom Tabani says he's ready to resign but denies any responsibility in the murder of his ex-wife. Places of worship reopen doors in Niger's capital city after more than a month of closure due to the health crisis. Some Cameroonian citizens denounce a lack of supervision in the response to the coronavirus pandemic.
They didn't shoot anyone.
Our top story today: Lesotho's disputed Prime Minister Thomas Tabani announced on Tuesday to the AFP that he intends to hand over his letter of resignation to King Letsie III this Wednesday. The head of government indicated that he is ready to step down and that he is still working on a few details before informing his colleagues. Mr. Tabani, who has been in power for nearly 3 years, is accused of being involved in the murder of his ex-wife in 2017. These accusations, that the Prime Minister denies, triggered a political crisis in the country. Despite his party, the All Basotho Convention, and the ruling coalition demanding his dismissal, Mr. Tabani has so far failed to resign or to indicate a specific date for his departure. As a result, his supporters officially withdrew their confidence on Monday in the National Assembly and announced the formation of a new government within 2 weeks. Parliament is due to meet on the 22nd of May to approve the appointment of a new Prime Minister, the current Finance Minister, Mokwetsi Majoro. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the Chief of Staff of President Felix Tshisekedi has now been replaced. A spokesman for the presidency announced on Tuesday evening to State Channel RTNC the appointment of a substitute for Vital Kamerhe the day after the opening of his trial for alleged corruption. President Tshisekedi has appointed his Deputy Chief of Staff, Mr. Casimir Kolongele Eberhande, to act as an interim. Vital Kamerhe, who hasn't resigned from his duties, remains in prison, where he has been detained since the 8th of April over embezzlement of public funds charges. The first hearing of his trial was postponed until the 25th of May for further investigation. In Mozambique, the infamous hidden debt scandal took a new turn earlier this week. On Tuesday, the Constitutional Court of Mozambique declared null and void loans amounting to $1.4 billion contracted illegally by two Mozambican public companies, Pro Indicus and MAM, between 2013 and 2014 to finance maritime surveillance, fishing and shipyard projects. The Constitutional Court, seized by a civil society organization named Mweti, ruled that the loans, governed by British law and secretly contracted by these two companies, were illegal as they had not been approved by Parliament, and therefore the government did not have to repay them. The Constitutional Court also argued that British justice should recognize that the law of Mozambique has not been respected and that the debts are null. The discovery of these hidden loans in 2016 had led to the suspension of international aid, plunging the country into a severe financial crisis. In Sudan, Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok, along with the Sudanese Ministry of Irrigation, announced in a statement on Tuesday that they reject the agreement offered by Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed on the filling of the reservoir of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam as of July, due to technical and legal problems. Mr. Hamdok believes that the only way to reach a full agreement is to get all parties back to the negotiation table as soon as possible. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is a gravity dam located on the Blue Nile River in Ethiopia that Ethiopian authorities have been building since 2011. It will become the largest hydroelectric power plant in Africa when completed, as well as the 7th largest in the world. However, the massive project has been a source of tensions between Addis Ababa and Cairo since 2011. The United States and the World Bank have been sponsoring discussions since November 2019 aimed at finding an agreement between the three countries. In Niger, places of worship are finally allowed to reopen doors. The government announced on Tuesday the lifting of the curfew in the country's capital, Niamey, and the reopening of places of worship as of this Wednesday. Religious sites were closed since late March to fight against the spread of the new coronavirus. The government accepted the proposal made by the religious leaders of the country in view of the favorable trend of the evolution of the pandemic in the country. However, the authorities asked the religious leaders to demand from the faithful that they observe safety measures, including washing hands with soap or hydroalcoholic gel, disinfecting places of worship before each prayer session, wearing face masks, and respecting the physical distance of at least 1 meter. In case of deterioration of the situation as a result of the reopening of places of worship, the government reserves the right to reconsider this decision. On the health front, a team of 12 Chinese medical experts landed in the Democratic Republic of the Congo's capital city Kinshasa on Tuesday to help fight against coronavirus that has already contaminated over 1,000 people in the country in just 2 months. The Chinese experts selected by the Chinese government will work in collaboration with the Congolese team under the direction of Jean-Jacques Muyembe, in charge of the response against the pandemic in the country. The delegation intends to travel to various parts of the country and share their expertise and advice. They will organize seminars and training sessions for Congolese and Chinese healthcare personnel in the country and exchange with Congolese medical teams on the treatment of infectious diseases. They brought with them a donation of 4 tons of medical equipment from their government to the Congolese people, composed of medications, protective suits, gloves, boots and masks. The relatives of Senegalese who died abroad of COVID-19 are finally able to grieve properly after President Macky Sall lifted the ban on the repatriation of bodies, according to lawyers of a collective form to obtain their return. The ban had caused great distress among the victims' families when they heard that the remains of their loved ones will be buried overseas. Senegal had banned the repatriation of victims in early April, citing the high risk of contagion due to the manipulation of the remains. The Supreme Court upheld this decision last Thursday by invoking the precautionary principle. However, President Macky Sall, while easing virus restrictions on Monday evening, announced that it will now be possible to carry out these repatriations in compliance with the required health conditions. The president invoked the family's pain, aggravated by the distance, adding to their grief. In Cameroon, as the coronavirus pandemic continues to spread in the country, people in Douala continue to live their lives as usual. Young people even continue to play football in stadiums, and Douala's central market remains crowded. Only a handful of people are wearing face masks in public places, to the dismay of some citizens.
It's terrible. Look, it's a mess all over the place and people have gotten used to it. They've gotten used to it and it doesn't mean anything to them. It's their daily routine. Look at the bars. People are kissing, talking mouth to mouth with spit coming out of one mouth to the other. It doesn't mean anything to anybody. So there's this lack of culture, this lack of education, this lack of supervision.
We are all outraged by this laxity of the population. But what are we going to do about it? This is a decision that comes from the government. It's up to them to find solutions to make the people and the Cameroonians safe.
Since the government announced the easing of virus restrictions, bars and other snacks are always full of people.
Many people think that the disease is over and that we can already circulate normally. Yet we are exposing ourselves even more, and that is why we are asking citizens to continue to respect the prescribed barrier measures.
Samuel Dibua, governor of the coastal region, fears virus contamination within communities. The authorities requested a newly constructed social housing to isolate the sick and to prevent a massive influx of new COVID-19 patients.
The government of the Republic decided to requisition the buildings at the Yassa housing level to provide comfort to the confined COVID patients. And we came to reassure ourselves of the progress of the work on the site.
Unlike many other African countries, Cameroon has not put in place strict confinement measures such as the closure of public places and restrictions on movement. As a result, with 2,579 cases of coronavirus contamination, the country is one of the nations most affected on the continent by the pandemic. In Angola, despite the easing of lockdown measures imposed on the country's capital city and the reopening of businesses, a neighborhood of Luanda remains isolated after authorities recorded several COVID-19 cases in the area. Residents expressed their concerns over the impact of the government's decision.
It's very complicated, very complicated. Well, it's not possible to confine us inside our homes when people are already used to going out every day looking for bread. We have to comply with the quarantine that is mandatory because the state has ordered this quarantine. So we have to comply so as not to transmit it.
Yes, we've stayed at home longer with these new cases that we now have. We have already confirmed 40 cases and authorized another reopening of the squares and warehouses. And now in this part we've seen a rise in cases. How are we going to manage this situation?
Angola has officially recorded 45 cases of coronavirus contamination, including 14 recoveries and 2 deaths. Finally, the Uganda Wildlife Conservation Education Center has appealed for funds that will enable workers to feed the animals over the lockdown period.
We have had a shortfall of $400,000 as a result of the lockdown, which was basically supposed to come from the visitors. And since we closed down, that implied that income is not coming in.
The wildlife sanctuary, will close its doors since March 27 due to confinement measures against the coronavirus, has not had any visitors since then. The center has appealed for funds as it only has enough to feed its animals until June.
Yeah, the daily costs of feeding our animals on a daily basis range between $850 to $1,000. Therefore, the government is promising to come in. We have also launched a fundraising drive with well-wishers, and people can donate through our website, through mobile money numbers, and they are responding. So we are currently able, using our reserves, to run up to the end of June.
The isolation and the quietness which is around is also, on the other side of the coin, it has also helped animals to breed. And then also, it has also enhanced our capacity in improving the environmental enrichment activities. So we are doing more of the environmental enrichment activities to distract them from the isolation.
The center takes care of 280 animals in total. In addition to feeding the animals, donations will also be used to pay salaries of staff members working at the sanctuary. That's it for today. Thank you for watching Vox News.